As diplomatic pressure continues to mount, the Trump administration finds itself under siege from Beijing's shocking tactics in the ongoing trade conflict. With geopolitical tensions at an all-time high, the world watches with bated breath as the two superpowers engage in a game of economic one-upmanship. But what exactly is driving China's aggressive stance? And how will the Trump administration respond to the escalating crisis? Get the latest Trump news and analysis as we delve into the intricacies of this high-stakes standoff and explore the far-reaching implications for global trade and international relations. In this video, we'll dive into the latest developments and explore the potential implications of China's actions on Trump's presidency. Will Trump be able to weather the storm, or is his presidency in jeopardy? Watch to learn about what Beijing intends to do. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is constantly threatening his key trading partners with new duties. The European Union is afraid of Washington's protectionist measures and is already estimating possible losses. But China has not waited and has already prepared a legislative framework to give a tough response to the new American authorities. In case of coming to power, Donald Trump promised to introduce 10% duties on imports of any goods from other countries, with certain categories of goods subject to a 20% tax, 60% tariffs on imports from China, and cars manufactured outside the U.S., 100% duties. During Trump's last presidential term, 25% duties were imposed on Chinese imports. After winning the election, he threatened the BRICS countries with imposing 100% duties if they did not abandon plans to create a currency alternative to the dollar. Liu Pengyu, spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington, said the U.S. has long used the hegemony of the dollar to transfer crises to other countries, spreading American inflation to other parts of the world. The U.S. has made the dollar a geopolitical tool that harms international economic and financial stability and undermines international order, the diplomat explained. He also added that, unlike Washington, the BRICS will continue to promote economic cooperation and a financial system that is more equitable and inclusive. According to Chinese experts, China currently has 30% of the world's industrial production, while the United States has 10% less. This arrangement clearly does not suit the U.S. president-elect. In the case of imposing large duties, the growth of the world's second economy may decrease, given the importance of the manufacturing sector. UBS estimates that within 3 years, if Washington imposes high duties, China could lose about 3% of GDP, and the U.S. could lose up to 1.5% of GDP. The main ally of the United States, the European Union, also has reasons for concern. All these nice little European countries that have gotten together, they don't buy our cars, they don't buy our farm products. But they sell millions and millions of cars in the United States. No, no, and no, they're going to have to pay a heavy price, Trump promised on the eve of the election. The Eurozone currently has a positive trade balance with the United States, with EU countries selling $200 billion more to Washington than they buy from it. In Germany, the Institute of Economics estimated that the country could lose between $127 billion and $180 billion, and the country's GDP would be 1.5% lower if Trump raises import duties to 10%. Experts concluded that export-oriented engineering and automotive companies would be hit hardest. Germany is most vulnerable, with its 3 biggest export items to the U.S., machinery, chemicals, and vehicles, still lacking demand. U.S. tariffs could push the German economy into a more severe downturn. In the first half of 2024, the U.S. was the most important trading partner of the Federal Republic of Germany. Experts at the Institute of Economic Affairs concluded that the EU would respond with an equivalent increase in tariffs. In particular, The European Commission has already started drafting a bill that would increase duties by up to 50% on some American goods. However, the margin of safety of Brussels is not so large. The EU has not yet recovered from the consequences of the energy crisis. Production in energy-intensive industries has fallen by 10 to 15%. The largest economies are experiencing industrial decline, while the EU depends on American LNG, which gives the future administration of Donald Trump additional leverage. As for China, it has prepared thoroughly. During his first presidential term, Donald Trump launched a full-scale trade war with China. At that time, Washington's drastic steps, tightening control over investments, sanctions against Chinese manufacturers and high duties, came as a complete surprise to Beijing. But now the Chinese authorities have drawn conclusions and prepared serious countermeasures. The Financial Times believes that it is China's decision to impose sanctions and restrict access to critical supply chains and blacklist foreign companies. Chinese authorities have recently introduced the law on countering foreign sanctions. In particular, it includes clauses that regulate the export of dual-use goods in response to the actions of organizations and states that, with the help of various pretexts, hinder the development of the PRC, seek to suppress and contain it. In general, Beijing has already proved that it is able to inflict tangible economic damage on the U.S. In 2018, China imposed retaliatory duties on 128 U.S. goods. And in early December, China imposed an outright ban on exports to the U.S. of a number of materials that, according to the Chinese authorities, may have potential military applications. In particular, gallium, germanium, antimony, and superhard materials fell under the ban. They are very important for the production of semiconductor components. In addition, China demands stricter control over the end use of graphite products supplied to the U.S. International experts note that the Chinese are likely to prepare some support measures for some of their regions that specialize in the production of specific products. In parallel, the Chinese authorities will try to increase their presence in alternative markets, as well as to strike back at the U.S. These may include bans on exports of raw materials and components for industrial production where China has monopoly positions or very strong positions in the global market. And traditionally, the blow is struck at those types of exports that are the most politically sensitive. These are agricultural and food products. China prefers to ban imports of wine or some other products in retaliation. Luxury goods can also be banned. These are things that are produced on the territory of Western countries, but at the same time, stopping supplies to the country does not cause social problems because mass consumers do not buy them. Additional retaliatory steps Beijing can take are not in the area of trade, but in the area of pressure on U.S. businesses operating inside China. Trade is only a small part of the standoff. There are tens of thousands of U.S. companies operating inside the PRC, generating tens and hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue per year. These are huge volumes of business. Not all of them are unique or high-tech. China has huge hotel and food service chains, and it is seen as a retaliatory space to strike sales of U.S. businesses inside China. Beijing has already hinted at this possibility. U.S. policy towards the PRC will tighten, but to what extent are these threats by Trump fully realized? If so, it will mean certain policy choices. There is a huge base of U.S.-China economic cooperation in China, built up since the late 1970s, and still businesses in China are trying to influence decisions. How will those giants and large corporations in the U.S. that have been operating in China for years and have in the recent past entered the capital of many Chinese corporations feel about this? Even businessman Elon Musk, who is close to Trump, has a huge business in China. Tesla cars are made with reliance on Chinese components. Pennsylvania billionaire Jeffrey Yass is being hailed by the media as the man whose proximity to Donald Trump could save TikTok from being banned in the U.S. Yass's trading firm, Susquehanna International Group, owns a 15% stake in the social network's parent company, China's ByteDance. Apple, General Motors, Amphenol Corporation, Corning Incorporated, Boeing and many other major U.S. corporations have significant assets and interests in China, reflecting the importance of the Chinese market to their global strategy. How closely aligned are major U.S. corporations with the Chinese market? What makes them vulnerable to changes in politics and economic relations between the two countries? We will certainly talk about that next time. Trump may be forcing the process to cut off all the loose ends at once. Otherwise, business associated with China will be trying to lobby for an easing of the situation indefinitely. Experts from various strategic centers subtly hint that a grand bargain with China under Trump is possible. Some Chinese policymakers are very hopeful about this deal. Beijing is keeping the window of opportunity open. These probes are being made at various levels, and it is being done to generate some nervousness between the U.S. and China. Some experts mistakenly believe that this is a perfectly designed game by Trump. He will do this to tie China's hands and force it to be more malleable in negotiations with Washington. In fact, a very powerful anti-China team of future ministers and advisors is being formed under Trump. Anti-China restrictive policies will be at the center of U.S. attention, and the methods of pressure on China will become tougher and more sophisticated. However, Beijing intends to apply greater leverage and countermeasures against U.S. sanctions. First of all, China will try to limit cooperation with the U.S. in the field of high technology, as well as in further supplies of rare earth metals, or a number of components containing these rare earth metals. But most importantly, it will reduce food purchases from the U.S., which will hit ordinary American farmers, as it already did in 2022. Under the circumstances, China will be able to respond with tough sanctions against U.S. companies operating in China, limit the withdrawal of assets and profits, and tighten state regulation of their activities. In addition, China will continue its double circulation strategy to reduce its dependence on Western technologies and markets. In opposition to the U.S., China will continue to further strengthen economic cooperation with its allies, such as Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, BRICS countries, and the Global South. According to many experts, the parties will not achieve a decisive advantage, but the damage to the global economy will be very significant. Instead of globalization, regionalization of economies may intensify, with the U.S. and China leading opposite economic blocs. If the confrontation escalates, there is a growing likelihood of new mutual sanctions, bans, and restrictions that will affect the global economy. The outcome of this confrontation depends on the global political environment, the resilience of the Chinese economy, and the ability of the U.S. to mobilize its allies against China. Trump's policies are likely to increase tensions, but will not lead to an unambiguous victory for either side.